Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Is anyone in there? I feel like you're really far away. Should I? Let me zoom you in a bit more. I've really accepted that I'll never get my framing right, so welcome. We've nearly done a full year of book reviews and I'm so happy about it. Feeling so good about it. I read 10 books in November. I had 1 DNF, that's not counted in that figure. We are currently 72 books into our 100 book target. I'm very comfortable and confident and at peace with the fact that I'm not going to hit 100 books this year. That's fine. I don't think I'm going to target myself next year. It is what it is. I tried. I had some slumpy months. I'm not going to read for the sake of a target in this last month. I'm not going to like stress myself to read. Welcome back readers. Welcome back bookworms. If you're new, my name's Charlotte. I do book reviewing amongst some other things. As you've probably just heard, I have a 100 book target that I'm clearly not going to hit. But it's fine, we're still going to review every month. If any of you are interested, I don't use Goodreads because I don't really like their reviewing system that much, but I do use a website called Storygraph. It's an app. It has a much more robust like reviewing system, trigger warnings. You can just get a bit more from the app, and I feel like their recommendations once you start inputting books are really good, so that'll be linked in the description box. If you want to keep up to date with my reads in real time as well, I do try to post new books that I'm starting on my Instagram stories, and I do have a highlights, so I'll pop that in the description box as well. So let's not dick about, let's get into reviewing. The first book I read in the month of November was Crown of Midnight by Sarah J Maas. This is the second book in the Throne of Glass series, depending on what order you read it, and it is a fantasy book. I did read this one on Kindle as well. I've been buying them on Kindle because I just can't commit to reading a series of physical books at the moment. I've got commitment issues. And you know what? We're starting the month off strong because I gave this book 5 stars. So someone did kindly correct me because I asked on my last video. So it's not Kalena, it's Selena. Selena? Yeah, I think it's Selena. I'm not gonna lie, I prefer Kalena. I'm gonna refer to her correctly though, as the author intended. There should be no spoilers, but the Throne of Glass reviews are quite sparse because of this. So for a little very brief synopsis, Selena has proven herself as the King's champion and now she's loyal to the crown. I feel like that's really all I can say without giving too much away. So I did think the first quarter of this book was relatively meek, maybe is the word, but the rest of the book more than makes up for it. There's a lot of relationship building, there's a lot of emotional setup, there's lots of like interpersonal stuff going on between the characters. It gives me fucking whiplash, to be quite honest, because there is so much going on emotions wise and it's very twisty and turny. I felt like the first book was very foundation laying, which sounds really obvious considering it's the first in like an 8 or 9 book series. I know she's really young, she's like 19 when this book takes place, but I kind of wish Sarah J Maas would stop calling Ardalan's assassin a girl. I really picked up on that she's constantly referred to as a girl, and I know every author will have this, like certain phrases and stuff that they use repeatedly. I always tend to like zero in on them, I can't help but notice it. But yeah, just this constant like infantilization of her. That's just like a nitpicky thing for me though, it's fine. But no, I genuinely did love this book. I feel like I can't really review it too much without giving spoilers. Once again, I'm very surprised this is only book 2. One of my really close friends is reading, or has read this, and when I've been like live messaging her about it as I'm reading, she said it's going to be a completely different series, like just you wait, buckle in. By the time you get to like book 4, 5, 6, it's just the landscape has completely changed. For a 5-star review, I feel like this is quite a quick review, but again, I really can't discuss it too much without fully spoiling it. I'm gonna move on to my next read, I'm sorry. Next was another Kindle book that I've been anticipating, and it's Hopeless by Elsie Silver. This is Chestnut Springs book 5. This is the last book in the series, and this is a small town romance. It's quite spicy, quite adult NSFW, and this gets 4.5 stars from me. To synopsize, as the eldest Eton child and a veteran, a military hero, it's safe to say Beau is classed as the town prince. He's very handsome. Bailey, on the other hand, has the most hated family in Chestnut Springs. She's kind of like the outcast. Her brothers are not great, and she just works the bar, minds her business. She wants to be separated from her family, but people don't like her. So this, like I said, this is the final book in the Chestnut Springs series. It's really hard for me to say which couple I like best. I think I like Theo and Winter best, and then Beau and Bailey are a very close second. For a long time it was Willa and Cade, but I think maybe because I read it a while ago, this is more like fresh in my mind. Elsie Silver was gonna have a hard follow-up for this book because it's so anticipated and everyone loved Theo and Winter so much. I will say I do think Bailey carried the story here. For nearly all of her books, we're kind of teased with this extra level of depth to Beau. He has PTSD, he's kind of got this darker level, he's had some mental health issues, obviously whatever happened to him, which is explored more in this book when he was in the military, is discussed. I do think his PTSD isn't like explored as fully. Like, we get quite a lot of depth and character growth from Bailey, and we do get some growth from Beau, but I just wanted a bit more. As far as tropes go, you know me, I've spoken about it enough. I'm not like a massive proponent of the age gap trope. It's just not something I enjoy. If you enjoy it, that's fine. It's not that I don't enjoy it, I just don't care for it. It's not like a big deal breaker for me, but it's not something I actively seek out. This age gap trope was like large enough but not massive like some of the books I've read, and there also is this kind of fake marriage trope in it, which, to be honest, I'd be interested to hear other readers' takes on this. I haven't read any reviews of it yet or watched any reviews on YouTube. I feel like the fake marriage trope was almost a little bit unnecessary. It was brought up and then just kind of mentioned when it was like helpful or useful. I think for a fake marriage trope you have to like leave the house, and they don't seem to do much out and about as a couple that's outside his family. They do a little bit, but not a huge amount. There's quite a lot of talk around her because the townsfolk do not like her, and I feel like they only go out once or twice and they don't do a lot to mitigate that. I'm pretty sure there is a scene where they go out to like the city and they have a good time together, but that's not doing much for her. A lot of my star ratings are based on like my investment in the characters, so despite all those bits, that's why it did get a 4.5 for me. This patch of sun that's like shining off, I think it's like shining off a satellite dish or something. The next book I read was a physical book, and it is Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. This is horror thriller short stories, and this for me got 4.5 stars. The ratings are coming in high this month. I was off to a good start. I was flying through books. You might remember, but this is the author that wrote Our Wives Under the Sea, and someone I work with kindly lent me this, so I was really happy to get a copy of this. I've got to give it back though. So this is a collection of short stories that is based in horror. It's centered around women and transformation and turning and metamorphosis. Women turn into insects, men turn into stone, organs are taken and spliced into other people. So following Our Wives, someone lent me this book because I said I absolutely loved it, and guess what? I absolutely love this too. I know a lot of people don't actually like short stories. I personally really like them. I love the feeling of being completely immersed in a short story and then turning the page and it's the end. There's just something so complete and perfect about a short story. I think there's a real talent in just like letting it go. I think so many authors make books so much longer than they need to be. How many times have you read a book that said if this was about 100 pages shorter, it would have been perfect, or they just should have left it as a duology, or they should have left it as a standalone book? I don't know why it got into a massive series. The same with movies as well, actually, and TV series. You know when it's a good thing and it becomes too big and too sprawling and harder to reel in? I think there's a real talent in being able to like call it quits. Sorry if this patch of sun is distracting. I feel like it's just gonna like move across my face. So that same creepy, crawly, slow, unraveling sense of horror that I loved in Our Wives is just perfectly replicated in this. It's a very distinct style of writing. It's that unknown sense of horror that she does so well, that fear of the unknown, that kind of unraveling dread. Delightfully creepy and unsettling. It would have gotten a 5, but there was just 1 or 2 stories that were a little bit of a miss for me because I'm rating it as a collective. There was definitely stories in there that would have been a 5 if they were a standalone. And the first story, which is called Mantis, was my favourite, which obviously just set the book up for really high standards for me. I could have just called it quits there and been like, yeah, perfect, I love it. I'm very confident in saying that Julia Armfield's writing just continues to blow me away. Next up, I listened to a book. I delved back into the world of audiobooks. I actually redeemed the free trial of Audible, so you get 2 credits. I laughed because I was like, oh yeah, shame if I forget to renew it and I'm stuck with another audiobook, and that's exactly what I did. I'm really annoyed about that. So for my first pick, I went with Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a historical fiction, I suppose you'd call it, because it's based on Greek mythology, and guess what? 5 out of 5 stars for me. I can't believe it's taken me this long to read this book. Well, listen to this book. This is a absolutely dazzling reimagining of Homer's Iliad. A very immersive read on love and war that follows Achilles and Patroclus from Patroclus's point of view. So I'm still on the fence about audiobooks in general, but let me tell you, the narrator for this was so good. I prefer a British narrator anyway, I've noticed. That tends to be a recurring theme for me, and I've decided that most audiobooks need to err on the side of either historical fiction for me or completely non-fiction. I think where I was audiobooking fantasy, that's where it fell down for me, because names, made up magical systems, made up currencies, world, etc., really hard to follow. There were some points that I thought were quite slow in this book, audiobook. It's quite slow paced. Because the book itself was so atmospheric, I genuinely didn't notice these bits. It just felt like I was taking a slow plodding walk through the Greek countryside. To have the book from Patroclus' point of view was really immersive. I quite literally felt like enthralled by Achilles the whole time. So immersive, so heartbreaking, so heartbreaking. The narrator was fantastic, and it really added to the overall experience of heartbreak for me, just because his voice was like so soothing and so like yearning and desperate. I am gonna buy the physical copy. I'm gonna see if I can get like a fancy edition or something that's not like the usual paperback edition, or I'd be tempted to buy it and get it rebound. That's how much I like it. I've never had a book rebound before, but I'm thinking about it. The Greeks really know how to do a tragedy, don't they? The spiraling tension with like the prophecies and the relationships building for it to culminate, how it culminates, I was blown away. I cannot believe it took me so long to read. If I could sum this book up in one word, it would just be gasp, gasp. And go back to the middle now because the sun's gone. Next up was a Kindle Unlimited read. This was The Whispering Dark by Kelly Andrew. This is like a young adult dark academia fantasy. This is only 2 stars for me, and I think that's quite generous. So our protagonist Delaney is bored of being perceived as fragile due to her deafness. She's been accepted into the prestigious God Bowl University, which I'm thinking is supposed to be like an Ivy League style university, and they have like a secret program there which she's going to be part of. In this secret program, students are trained to slip into parallel worlds. I was feeling in the schmood for some dark academia when I downloaded this, and I really wish I hadn't read it because it was just a bit of a disappointment. It's been on my Storygraph TBR for quite a while, and it was just not a great read. It was just quite bad. So one thing that really piqued my interest about this book was the deaf protagonist, but the deafness being used as like a catalyst for her magic. So there's something about her living in silence that speeds everything up, and she has this like natural talent. Loved the concept of that. I'm not hearing impaired, so I can't really speak to how accurate the representation is of her as a deaf protagonist. She does have a cochlear implant, which I think there's some confusion at the beginning because it mentions straight off the bat that she's deaf, but it's not really made clear that she has a cochlear implant. So there's some scenes in like the first 100 pages where she can hear some things, but then it's not clear, and then about 100 pages later they mention that she has a cochlear implant. Obviously I know there's different levels of hearing impairments, but it's kind of made out that she absolutely cannot hear anything, and then all of a sudden she can hear stuff. So I started getting a bit confused, and then only then, yeah, 100 pages is it made clear. That was quite common in a lot of the reviews I read for the book, that was a bit confusing in itself. As I mentioned in the synopsis, she is kind of bored of being perceived as fragile, but constantly throughout the book the author just refers to her being fragile. There's references to glass, being a glass child, breaking, shattering, glass. That got really boring really quickly. The book just generally is written, it feels like it has a lot of missing scenes. I feel like there's lots of holes and gaps, and I don't know what's going on in a lot of it. It was just generally really confusing. Other than Colton, who's the male MC, and Delaney, who's also referred to as Laney, Wednesday, which was kind of confusing. I just feel like I couldn't tell you a lot about any of the other characters. They're very non-existent, they feel very 2D, and it's a shame. The cover's really nice, I really wanted to enjoy it, I'm really sorry. Next up is a physical book. I only read 2 physical books this month. It is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is book 1 in a 3-book series, I believe, and it is 4 stars for me. Chloe Brown is a chronically ill computer nerd. She almost gets hit by a car and has like a near-death experience and creates a Get a Life list. First on her list is moving out of her family home, which she does. But now it's for the other things on the list. So she enlists Sexy Red, not Sexy Red, but a man called Red who's very sexy, enlists him to help her rebel. I really liked this book. I thought it was a very easy read. I've been recommended this for like over a year now by other romance readers. I feel like the author's really struck the right balance of introducing the heavier topics like mental illness, chronic illness, loneliness, but like with a little bit of humour and jest. So I felt very invested in Chloe and Red as separate characters too, and then the introduction of the other Brown sisters felt very natural, so it's like generally piqued my interest to read the rest of the series. I don't know if it's just me, I found the writing style like a little bit pretentious. I don't know if pretentious is the right word. So Chloe, our protagonist, is obviously very, very intelligent and very verbose. I don't know if pretentious is the correct phrasing, but it had that very like rom-com-y style of writing. Like, I know that that's what it is, it's a rom-com, but it almost felt, you know how like people write British books, like sometimes it felt like too British in its like mannerisms, like it almost felt a bit, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say like Bridget Jonesy, because I love Bridget Jonesy, but that's kind of like the closest comparison I can draw. But that wasn't enough for me to stop reading it. I just like had a bit of a moment where I was like, oh, every now and then. Do you know what I will say though? It is very, very steamy. I was not expecting it from this book. Like, I knew that there would be some smart, but this was steamy. It had me like kicking my feet, giggling. I loved their romance. It's definitely a page turner. The reason it loses a star is mainly because of the prose, and I felt their kind of like hatred to love feeling turnaround was too quick. I generally prefer a slow simmer. I felt like the author could have just slowed that simmer down a little bit, but other than that, it was really good. I'm really looking forward to reading the other books in the series. I've already got one of them physically, and then I'll probably order the next one. Next up was my second audiobook. This was Mythos by Stephen Fry. Again, it's historical, kind of like fiction, non-fiction. I'm gonna say fiction, historical fiction, because it's myth and legend, and this was 4 stars for me. To summarise, this is the Greek myths and legends as told and written by Stephen Fry in chronological order for the most part. I am not going to find an audiobook at all if it's Stephen Fry. So while my understanding of this book is it doesn't quite capture all of the Greek myths and legends, it does a pretty damn good job at getting most of them. As someone that finds it really hard to read history, this book was perfect for me. I have a little bit of a penchant for mythology and legend, despite the fact that I don't love reading history. It can be quite dry sometimes. Something to do with his storytelling and his writing style, just perfect. The mostly chronological order of the stories being told made it really easy to digest as well. It started off with Titans, and kind of, it was very sequential the way it was broken down. So yeah, the way that that was organised made it very easy to listen to and understand. I thought it was quite accessible because of course there is an ever-changing cast of names and characters and figures and gods and goddesses, and a lot of it is in very hypothetical terms. Some of it's more literal. Can be quite confusing, I think, and obviously it's Greek names. Some of my favourite bits were the little anecdotes that Stephen Fry had written about how maybe the names or the linguistics or the philosophy or the gods and goddesses are still with us today in various elements, in linguistics, in words, in modern lessons, in beliefs, in modern philosophies. I found that so interesting. I'm like a little bit, I don't want to call myself like a polymath, but that's just like someone that likes learning or has their fingers in a lot of pies. I just love learning, so that was one of the best bits for me. I would be great in a pub quiz. General trivia is like my jam. I've had a lot of these stories anyway, but his unique embellishments and flares and bits added on didn't make it boring to listen to. Last quarter of the book is probably why it loses the star. I found it harder to listen to. I was genuinely less interested in those last myths and legends as it went on, so that's a me problem, not a him problem. I just found it less captivating than the rest of the book. Lost a bit of steam for me then. Next up, another Sarah J Maas book, another Kindle book. I read Air of Fire, which is Throne of Glass book 3. This is obviously a fantasy book. Another 5-star read for me. Again, I feel like really difficult to synopsize, but let's just say Selene has been sent to a new land to deal with her truth, and there is an abundance of evil simmering in the background. Not me, I cannot keep up with the introduction of new characters to these books. They are slowly turning into something completely different before my very eyes. I'm very glad we didn't stay in the King's Castle. I'm enjoying the new scenery, the new world building. I'm going to keep these as spoiler free as I possibly can, but still try to give you a decent review, so you might want to skip forward. It's completely up to you. I'm not going to give out any outright plot points, but there's just going to be some allusions, some things that allude. Despite it all, I'm really enjoying the introduction of the new characters, especially Manon. Love her. Kind of enjoy the darkness, the depth, the having a heart despite saying you haven't got one. Very, very interested in her, and also very interested to see how all of this like knits together and they meet our protagonists. Don't really love Kale, is it Kale? Chael? Let me know. Don't really love his progression, to be honest, but that's because I don't like any progression away from Loverboy. Obviously he's moving away from that Loverboy that we know him all as, that loyal King's Loverboy, to something a bit more gritty. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if she killed him off. Dorian's storyline felt a bit sloppy for me. Like, let me know what you think about this. I was just a bit like eyebrows raised the whole time. But that being said, I understand that we needed a cataclysmic event that like furthered everything to get us here, to get us to this point. And I understand that that's what that was. I just didn't love it. You know me, I absolutely love a training. I love a training montage. Like, I love a protege training montage. So other than that, I loved it. There's not much else I can say without spoiling it. My next book, which I'm not counting in the 10 book figure, but I thought I'd include, was my DNF. This is Master of Salt and Bones by Kerry Lake. This is a very dark romance, taboo kind of thing, kind of vibe. I'm not gonna rate it. It was a DNF for me. Very dark male protagonist, very like young, kind of unassuming, but with a dark streak. Female protagonist, lots of sex, lots of very taboo sex. The reason I DNF'd it is because drowning is a real big trigger for me. I can't like read about stuff like that, and there's a lot of kind of sex stuff around that. It's really hard to, I don't really know how to explain it because I didn't finish it. I tried to persevere and I respected my boundaries. I just couldn't do it. I do forget genuinely that that's a trigger for me. I just couldn't read it in great detail, and it's such a huge part of the book. This was recommended by a mutual of mine who always smashes it with book recommendations. We read really similarly, so yeah, it's a shame. I really wanted to read it. Respect your boundaries, research your trigger warnings. Don't be like me. I have like next to zero triggers, so I can read about drowning in some contexts, just not in others. So yeah, that's where I was at. My next read was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is a fantasy, like dark academia mystery book, and this was a 4 stars for me. Maybe just under a 4 stars, really hard for me to say. Galaxy Stern is a fairly unlikely member of the Yale freshman class. She got offered a full ride there after a literally tragic, horrifying event, but she arrives at Yale not knowing why she's there, who wants her there, and why they want her there, and from there she's thrown into a world of secret societies. First and foremost, I liked this book. Alex's character really surprised me. It's not what I was expecting. Obviously I've heard a lot of hype about this book, and I have put off reading it for quite a long time because I have been burned by booktok before. I think her character is fairly well developed and her backstory really surprised me. I wasn't really sure what to expect in general with this book, but the themes were darker than I anticipated, and that was a pleasant surprise. I think having read a fair amount, like a medium amount of dark academia, and not having read this, I was really pleasantly surprised, because I've probably only read like 1 dark academia book that I've enjoyed in the last year. They all just kind of seem a bit like they're trying to do something and it's not delivering. I liked the beige, dank and dark and damp like world building of the Yale setting. I thought she did that really well. I didn't get the immediately hooked feeling that a lot of people have reported with this read. It took me about 100 pages or so to get like properly into it and feel like any semblance of hooked. I feel like I've repeated this so many times with my reads recently, but I think the time jumps and the pacing were to blame for that. Clearly I just don't like books that aren't very clear in their time jumps, but I think it's just that confusion at the beginning, isn't it? Maybe time jumps are becoming something I like less and less, because it's either something that's really hard to get right, or it just feels a bit like a cheap shot. A little bit unsure on where I stand on that, you know? Like, I feel like it's quite a cheap shot into confusing people and making a book seem more complex than it is. That's not the case with this book, but that's just, I don't know. Let me know what you think about time jumps and pacing. I'm encountering it a lot more in my reading, and I don't know if it's a good thing. I think the multitude of secret societies and the magic system in this book can be a little bit hard to keep up with at times, but for the most part it was alright. I just had to like take it quite slowly when I was reading it, probably because there is so much like Yale context in this book. Overall, I think if I wasn't so invested in Alex and her backstory, I probably would have been a little bit bored and it would have got a lower rating. Last but not least is The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J Maas. This is a fantasy. This is Throne of Glass 0.5, so this is a prequel, and surprisingly this is 3.5 stars for me. So this is a prequel to the Throne of Glass series. The Assassin's Blade is 5 novellas which explore Celaena's like history and the world she lives in and like her context a little bit more. So you might know, but there are 2 reading orders to the Throne of Glass series. There is the purist way, which is the most accurate depiction like time-wise, I believe, and that's where you read The Assassin's Blade before you read any of the other books. And then there's the romantic way, which is where you read the books for the most emotional impact. So you read Assassin's Blade after you read Heir of Fire. So I think it's between book 3 and book 4, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm nothing if not romantic, so that's the way I'm doing it. The only reason this gets a slightly lower rating is because it felt like a bit of a slog for me. I really enjoyed it up until about halfway, and then I was just a bit like, oh, come on, let's finish. I don't know, it just didn't capture me as much. Maybe I was more keen to get into like the current events of the series, not current, but you know what I mean. I really liked The Assassin in the Desert, if that's what it's called. I thought that was really interesting. I really liked the world building of that. It's just nice to see outside of like the usual empire. I do think it gives us a really good insight into her development and like her character growth, and also you forget that she's 16 in this one because she's 19 in the other books, and she's so young, she's very unlikable. Gives you just this horribly unlikable angle of a very spoiled, very rich 16-year-old who is the best at what she does and has been trained to be cold and to be callous and to be remorseless. I can't really imagine what it would be like to read it first, because you do see like the villain arc hard, but I didn't like her in this book. So until the end, and obviously that's with the context of knowing what happens to some extent. I will say it's quite heart-wrenching, but I am reading it in the emotional order, and it was good to see kind of how she ends up going to Endovia. I wasn't very invested in Sam, which feels like the wrong thing to say. I don't know, maybe I just got a bit bored because I knew how it ended. If I'd have read that as like a standalone, would I have been as bored? Like if I'd read it at the beginning, because I could piece together quite a lot of like where we were and what happened, and knowing the future section of the book. It's very close to a 4 for me, but just isn't quite. Keen to hear your thoughts if you've read it the same order as I have, because I don't know anyone that's read it the same order as I have. Like not in real life, not in person. That was everything I read in the month of November. I feel like that was quite quick for a review video. I'm in my flow. It's not the first video I've recorded of the day, so I was able to like speed through it. I'm warmed up. As always, let me know your thoughts. I'm really interested to hear, and you get 10 points if you noticed my fake tan thumb, which I didn't wash off my finger, which is brilliant. It's been really annoying me all video, and I didn't want to point it out because I didn't want all of you to notice, but now we're at the end, I can point it out. I'm thinking about maybe doing like 5-star reads of 2023 and just going back through them all. I have so many ideas for book videos, and I just kind of can't like put them into a video plan or like into fruition or make them concept to video. So please, any suggestions, and I will try and make them, or I will just take them on board. If you liked my video, any like comments, likes, subscriptions, always very much appreciated. If you liked me so much that you want to follow me on other media channels, I'll pop all my information in the description box below. I upload on Wednesdays and Sundays, and I will see you on Sunday. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your evening, and I will see you very soon.